Breaking tonight, President Trump takes to Twitter in the wake of the FISA memo bombshell. Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. The president late this evening quoting the Wall Street Journal on Twitter in response to the FISA memo release, saying the memo lays out how the FBI failed to inform the FISA court that the Clinton campaign funded the dossier. The FBI became a tool of anti-Trump political actors, unacceptable in a democracy. The president goes on to say the FBI wasn't straight with Congress and hid most of these facts from investigators. We have quite a show on deck for you tonight. Ann Coulter, David Bossie, Governor Mike Huckabee, and Congressman Ron DeSantis all standing by live. Plus, I'll be talking to a spokesperson for the President of the United States in just a moment. I have one very important question for him. But first, my opening statement. He was right from the beginning. They were spying on him. They were wiretapping. They were listening in on Trump Tower. They were so desperate that he not be elected that they misled the most secret court of the United States in order to spy on an opposing political campaign in order to undermine a presidential election. Members of the highest echelon in our FBI and Department of Justice conspired to prevent an outsider from breaking the establishment stranglehold on the American people. They needed a reason to spy, so they made one up. They used a dossier of lies paid for by a major political party, the Democrat National Committee, and a presidential candidate, Hillary Rodham Clinton, to dupe that court. They swore to facts they knew were lies to get what they wanted in order to surveil a candidate they could not imagine being president. A cabal of arrogant, condescending employees of our government whose salaries we pay thought that we didn't count. They so wanted Hillary to become president that they violated all the rules and engaged in a charade so we would think there was a real investigation on the emails. They met on the tarmac. They gave people who didn't qualify immunity from prosecution without getting the required incriminating evidence. The FBI then changed lanes with the DOJ and publicly announced a decision in violation of all ethics rules. And they changed legal definitions to satisfy their political goal. They thought she'd be elected and no one would ever know. But she wasn't. So they plotted an insurance policy to bring him down anyway. You know, I've often talked about the Clintons coming on the scene from Arkansas in their bell-bottoms as pigs at the trough. But they really outdid themselves this time, using a foundation in name only to spread the wealth while infecting our departments of justice and the FBI. All the while, their comrades weaponized our tools of intelligence. This is what they do in third world countries, not in America. It's time for holier-than-thou Jim Comey and his band of conspirators from McCabe and Strzok on down to have Lady Justice take off her blindfold and see them for what they are. The arrogance of those seeking a change in a presidential election is unheard of in the United States. And let me be clear. This is not an attack on the FBI or the Department of Justice because these agencies are bigger than a couple of tainted inhabitants. This is not about one party versus another. It's not even about spying on an American citizen. It's about something even more. It's about an attempt to change the course of American history using the most powerful agencies in the United States government. How dare you? And that's my open. Tell me what you think on my Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram, hashtag Judge Jeanine. Joining me now with reaction to my opening statement and much more, Congressman Ron DeSantis, who's been at the forefront of getting this stuff released from the beginning. Good evening, Congressman.
Good evening, Judge.
I guess it was everything you said it was going to be that everyone said it wasn't going to be. And the question now is, what happens next?
I think there's going to be a number of things. Chairman Nunes has said publicly this is going to be a phase 2 where you're going to have another memo go through the same process, dealing with other agencies, including the State Department and their role in this. And I think that could potentially be explosive. I also think that the memo has raised problems for some of the individuals that you mentioned, including former FBI Director Jim Comey. I mean, he was not candid with the Intelligence Committee in terms of telling them the genesis of the dossier. So I think they're going to bring him in, put him under oath. But I think he's exposed himself for potentially making false statements. Of course, he leaked FBI documents after he got fired. Some of those documents may have had classified information, so he may have exposure there as well. And then one of the things I think really needs to be drilled down on, Judge, a lot of people are focusing on the FISA. Obviously, that's significant. The role of Bruce Orr, who was one of the top Justice Department officials, and his wife is working for Fusion GPS. And basically what happened is there was a direct pipeline from the Clinton campaign to the upper echelons of the Justice Department and FBI through Bruce Orr, because Hillary is funding Fusion, right. And then Fusion is sending all their negative fake research on Trump right to the Obama Justice Department.
You know,
I mean, that's really, really problematic.
It's problematic, but we knew this was a problem a year ago. So here's the question, Congressman. Who's going to investigate and prosecute? Who's going to bring on a grand jury, issue subpoenas, do everything they didn't do in the Hillary Clinton email case? Who? Rod Rosenstein? No, he's close to Comey. He's close to Mueller. In fact, Rod Rosenstein was the guy who walked Mueller over to be interviewed for FBI director, and when the president didn't hire him, the next day Rosenstein appoints him to be special counsel. If that isn't vengeance, I don't know what is.
Well, Ann, Rosenstein signed one of the FISA extensions, so he would be conflicted out of doing it. There's going to be a strong push in the Congress, the strongest we've had yet, for a special counsel to look into the FISA abuse and related matters. I think it's got to be someone who's not a part of the swamp, someone from outside Washington.
Who's going to do it?
Well, you're going to have to get Jeff Sessions to make the appointment. And,
do you think that's going to happen? You and I figured this out 6 months ago. He's in the middle of it, and he can't figure out that his job as a chief prosecutor in the United States is to start looking into this and stop with this namby-pamby stuff?
Well, here's the difference, though, Judge. 6 months ago, you didn't have Bruce Orr demoted. You didn't have Rybicki on his way out. You didn't have McCabe forced to resign. You didn't have James Baker reassigned. You didn't have any of that. So digging in has led to all this. People are dropping like flies at the Justice Department and FBI. Sessions has to notice that.
Yeah. But you and I both know that that's like changing a parking space. They need to be made criminally responsible. Anyway, Congressman DeSantis, I want to thank you. You started all this. I give you a lot of credit. I really do.
Thanks, Judge.
Good to talk to you. All right. We just heard from the president on Twitter about an hour ago, and now we're joined live by one of his top spokespersons, White House Press Secretary Hogan Gidley. All right. Good evening, Hogan. I have one question to ask you. The president tweeted today that he was totally vindicated as a result of this FISA memo. Does this mean that he's calling on Robert Mueller to end the investigation?
I wouldn't say he's calling on Robert Mueller to end the investigation, but what I can say is the president has been clear that this memo has raised some serious concerns about the integrity of the decisions made at the highest levels of the FBI and the DOJ when they can take the most intrusive surveillance mechanisms and methods and use them on American citizens based on nothing but a campaign document funded and paid for by Hillary Clinton. That should be alarming to all Americans.
It's not just alarming; it's critical because it is it is misleading the court. These people swear. I know. I used to sign warrants all the time. I mean, not a warrant at this level of FISA court, but you get that affiant to come before you, and he has to swear that what he's telling you is the truth. He has to satisfy several prongs. None of that was done here.
Right, and it was a document that obviously was omitted in the FISA warrant process. They did not tell this to the judge. Forget the fact that it was from the Clintons in the first place. I mean, obviously this thing was full of inaccuracies, but they didn't even tell the judge that's where they got the information from. That is a clear violation, and obviously this memo goes to expose that process, and I think all Americans are deeply concerned at this moment.
Well, you know, with the FISA application and what we found out, look, everybody's talking about this. I want to know, who is the lawyer who accompanied the FBI agent to go before the FISA court, okay? Whether it's Baker, Comey, McCabe, Rosenstein, all those guys, whoever that judge was, he needs to do what he or she needs to do whatever they have to do to get them on the red carpet, because they made a misrepresentation to the court, the highest, most secret court in the United States besides the Supreme Court. That judge is the person I'm waiting to hear from, because they either took him or they lied to him. Either way, it's bad.
You just mentioned it could quite possibly be the tip of the iceberg, and I don't disagree with that. But it's obvious now that the Congress is the investigative body here. This originated from Congress, this memo, and they've got their work cut out for them, because obviously they're facing obstruction at every turn as they try to move through this process. But they're the ones that have this, they originated this memo. They're the ones that are going to have to get to the bottom of this. But it's very clear this is opening up quite a big can of worms, if you will, in this town.
All right, what about Rod Rosenstein? You know, I saw the president's reaction when he was asked about him. Rod Rosenstein is still there. Does he have the confidence of the president?
Look, I serve at the pleasure of the president, as does Rod Rosenstein. If the president is displeased with you, believe me, you'll know it, and you won't be working there. But I will say this: there are no conversations or considerations for firing Rod Rosenstein at the White House.
Oh, boy. Hogan Gidley, thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Thanks so much, Judge.
All right. And here with more insight into the memo and what's up, former Trump campaign manager David Bossie. All right, David, are you as fired up as I am?
Oh, I am, Judge. This is exactly what the president was talking about.
Yeah.
It was a rigged election back then, and that's what the president knew then, and that's what we have found out to be a fact today.
You know, David, what's amazing is when the president first came out and he said, you know, that they were wiretapping at Trump Tower and all that other stuff, everybody mocked him. They ridiculed him. They made fun of him. Obama comes out and he's so condescending and so insulted. It's true.
Yeah, it was 100% true. It's an outrage that what the American people are just finding out, and what they're learning is that the FBI used a dirty dossier that has now been completely discredited to go to the FISA court, to get a FISA judge to issue this wiretap. It is an outrage. It should bother all Americans. And I'll be honest with you, I can't understand why the New York Times, Washington Post, and others are so troubled with us wanting to press the federal government for the answers of why they were doing this. It is so dirty. It is so corrupt. And Judge,
sad.
you know this. You understand this better than most, because the men and women of the FBI, America's premier law enforcement agency, doesn't deserve this. They are made up, that organization's made up of tremendous people who do a great job making America and Americans safe.
You don't even have to say that, David. You know, everybody's saying the FBI is great, the DOJ. We all know that. It's these people who infected it at the top.
That's right.
I'll bet you get calls like I get calls, all right, from FBI agents who are disgusted. Right. They are angry. You know, this thing should have been handled in a field office. Instead, it's handled at the upper echelon by a cabal on the 7th floor at the FBI. They're all pals.
And a few bad apples. A few bad apples have besmirched this organization, and that's really what troubles me, is that we need to honor and hold them up, and we need to do a good job job of cleaning this out so that we can get on with the business of what the FBI is supposed to be doing.
All right, let me ask you, David, some of the stuff that they've been saying about the memo that, is like Chicken Little. If this memo is released, the sky is going to fall. All right, so we have grave concerns, this is from the FBI, about material omissions of fact that impact the memo's accuracy. And Nancy Pelosi says Donald Trump has surrendered his constitutional responsibility as commander-in-chief by releasing the unredacted memo. It undermines our national security and basically is a bouquet to his friend Putin. What are these people talking about?
Yeah, she also said the tax cut was going to be Armageddon. They hate this president more than they love America. That is the fundamental problem with the Democrat Party today. They see hatred through their eyes. That's all they see.
I've never seen anything like it, David.
It is remarkable to me, and they do this every day. They say the sky is falling, and it doesn't. And the American people are catching on to it, and they're going to continue because they can't help themselves. Just look at what the president did at the State of the Union. He made them look like the buffoons that they are.
Yes, absolutely. David Bossie, so good to have you on tonight.
Thanks, Judge.
What a night on Justice tonight. Mike Huckabee, Katrina Pearson still coming up, but next, you haven't heard all the takes on the Nunes memo until you hear Ann Coulter's. Ann is on deck and standing by live. Don't change that channel. Don't touch the remote. Don't go anywhere. Hi, Ann. Welcome back to Justice. We continue tonight with our big story, the release of this explosive memo and the continued fallout. Here with her take on it all, conservative columnist and best-selling author Ann Coulter. All right, Ann, I want you to take a look at this. We've got MSNBC Rachel Maddow. That's it.
That's all they've got. This is what all the hype was about? For what is it, 2 weeks now they've been hyping this? I will admit to being shocked that this is what they released. It was just kind of like a sad trombone. We only bring that out for very special occasions.
And so you have a memo that's been declassified, and in the memo they say that Andrew McCabe used a document that he said he couldn't have gotten a warrant without, that was full of lies, and he didn't tell the court about the bias of individuals involved or that a candidate paid for it. Your take?
Well, for one thing, we now know what complete liars the Democrats and all of these hysterical, alleged national security and law enforcement experts are about, it's going to blow up any sort of, we'll have terrorist attacks. What will we do if this memo comes out? And then it comes out, that's all it is. Well, there were people who had seen the memo, who knew what the information was. And I think at this point, their argument is the fact that and by the way, it makes me totally love, and I think it makes most Americans love Trump even more. It really, It illustrates the point that it was always Donald Trump against both the Republican and the Democratic Party. It is Washington, D.C. against the people. And when you see the way high-level officials, not, as everyone has said, the rank and file, but high-level officials at the FBI were using documents funded by the Hillary campaign, someone who hated Donald Trump and didn't want him elected. And by the way, who started the whole Russia investigation? I don't think a big enough point has been made of this. It was Peter Strzok. He was the one who started the investigation. He's the one who's texting with his mistress. But I do think that Rosenstein probably, there are two separate issues. One is the Rosenstein, the civil liberties violations.
Right.
And I think Rosenstein should probably go. I don't know why Trump was ever...
You think?
Why was Trump ever hiring members of the swamp to begin with? I'm kind of mad at Trump for that. There are plenty of lawyers out in America who went to Harvard, too. You didn't have to move somebody over from the swamp, so he deserves what he gets. But now that he's found out, he should fire Rosenstein. Mueller, however, he hasn't done any of this. The danger with Mueller is he's looking like Patrick Fitzgerald. Remember the one independent counsel we had?
Yes, I do.
There was no crime.
Right.
And so all these people on TV keep talking about a perjury trap. They obviously have not the first idea what a perjury trap is. It's not just putting someone under oath when, you know what the truth is, we think this person is going to lie. No, it's when you are putting people under oath when there's no crime. And that's what Patrick Fitzgerald did. He found out there was nothing illegal about revealing a name, and then he puts all these people under oath. Somebody disagrees. And you find, and so if there is no crime here, and it's looking like there's no crime, remember that the entire Russia argument, the entire Russia collusion argument, comes from these four members who, they weren't members of Trump's staff. They were hangers on mostly. I mean, it's Roger Stone, great guy, but he keeps offering to testify publicly.
Let's try to.
You have Carter Page,
Papadopoulos.
You have Sessions and Papadopoulos. Every single one of them has fallen apart, and all you hear them say on the other networks and the Democrats is, well, this could be part of an obstruction of justice. Well, number one, no, if there's no crime, he shouldn't be putting anyone. But
and
number
collusion,
two,
by the way, is not a crime.
You can't put 0 + 0 + 0 together. So at this point, I think we have a reason to ask, what is it that Mueller's investigating? The whole thing was smoke and mirrors created by the swamp.
Okay, it's not just smoke and mirrors created by the swamp. It is worse than that. It's going to one of the highest courts in the country.
Right.
And I would think that the judge up there, because look, if someone came to me, a cop came to me and said, hey, Judge, I want a warrant. I put him under oath. He swears to this and that, and he's pulling the wool over my eyes, I'd have his badge. That's the end of it. You don't do that. How is the judge and the court tolerating this? And how is, if you got James Comey going in for an extension on the warrant after he's just told the president's unverified, then how do you go before a judge and get an extension on an even higher level of probable cause?
And Rosenstein himself. No, but the civil liberties issues, I do think, are different from the Russia collusion story by itself.
Right.
It just seems to me both of them are falling apart. And the argument that is being made on the other side is, oh, no, the sleazy, unverified dossier, that was just one of lots of evidence. That's why it's out of context. It's out of context. So, okay, can't the president declassify the entire thing? I think he ought to.
He can, but I think he's worried about making interjecting himself in this.
No.
But see, here's the thing.
This is corruption.
If they had other evidence that supported the wiretap, why put in the dossier that's full of lies? If you really had other evidence, why is the dossier? Why did Andrew McCabe swear that it was it?
And also, I think very importantly, why hasn't why are you bothering with the Manafort stuff and the little cheap stuff if they have proof that Carter Page was conspiring on behalf of Donald Trump to inject millions of dollars into the campaign? Well, we would have indicted the president already.
Well, but here's the thing. Carter Page is walking around because he hasn't done anything, apparently. And you got Manafort indicted for something that is fruit of the poisonous tree, for which he should move to have the charges.
But also is not collusion.
It's not collusion. Ann Coulter. Thanks. We could go on for an hour. Governor Mike Huckabee still on deck tonight. And tonight's panel has a lot to get into. Katrina Pearson, Richard Fowler, ready to talk about the memo and where we go from here. Stay right there, guys.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Alicia Acuna. A lone gunman wounded 6 African immigrants during a 2-hour shooting rampage in Italy. Police say the attack was racially motivated. One of the victims was seriously injured and needed surgery. The suspect is white and reportedly has an extreme right background with both neo-Nazi and neo-fascist ties. The shooting spree follows the arrest of a Nigerian refugee for the murder of an 18-year-old Italian woman. The crime has fueled anti-immigrant sentiments. Televangelist Pat Robertson is recovering from a stroke, but the 87-year-old is expected to make a full recovery. The founder of the Christian Broadcasting Network was rushed to the hospital on Friday. That's after a family member noticed symptoms. I'm Alicia Acuna. Now back to Justice with Judge Jeanine.
Dems and liberals continue to attack the White House and the GOP for releasing the FISA memo. Some saying it was dangerous, and others, like advertising executive Donny Deutsch, calling people to action. Take a listen.
Our democracy is under siege. People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
Wow. Joining me now, my fired-up political panel tonight, former Trump campaign spokesperson Katrina Pearson and Democratic strategist, Fox News contributor Richard Fowler. All right, Richard, do people need to take to the streets?
I don't know if they need to take to the streets, but I think it's very important that we outline some of the facts about this memo. I think one of the facts the facts that I found to be the most interesting is the case of Peter Strzok. So there has been a lot of talk about Peter Strzok being insanely biased against the Clinton administration based on those text messages. But what we've also learned out, Fox News reported 2 days ago that Peter Strzok was also responsible for drafting the memo in late October that led to the reopening of the Clinton campaign, possibly costing her the election. So that means even if he was biased, it still didn't take away from him doing his job.
Katrina, do you know why Strzok called for the reopening of that investigation?
Well, Judge, he had to. He had to get ahead of the media because the media was about to break the story on the emails that were found on Anthony Weiner's server. So the problem we have here is the Democrats are refusing to see one key issue in this memo, and no one seems to be talking about it, Judge, and that's the timeline. First, the FBI cannot label an American citizen a foreign agent unless they are knowingly engaging on compiling intelligence for a foreign entity. Then you can't get a FISA warrant unless they prove that you're an agent. And as you said in your previous segment, Carter Page is still walking around. But you will know that this investigation started in July after Trump clinched the nomination, and the same month the FBI exonerated Hillary Clinton from her email scandal.
July
the importance of that point is that we know exactly. We know that the FBI was in the tank for Hillary. They were careless. They were communicating on their government-issued devices, and they were shell-shocked when Donald Trump won that election, and that is why we're having this discussion today.
Your Honor, I have a couple of responses to that. Response number one on this Carter Page situation. We know from reporting that Carter Page was under the FBI's radar since 2013, number one. And number two, this warrant was renewed 4 different times. And for a FISA warrant to be renewed, it has to go back to the judge, and you have to prove that you're gaining information from this wiretap that is leading to moving the investigation forward. So that means every time, even if you give them the fact that they used this particular dossier, they went back to the judge 4 different times, and it could be 4 different judges saying, we have used this for the last 90 days.
Judges.
It could have been. We don't know that.
No, it's not.
We don't know that.
But this is exactly why,
we don't know
Richard.
that.
This is exactly why.
But we don't know that.
But this is why a second special counsel needs to be ordered to investigate these abuses that were uncovered in the House memo. This is extremely important, Judge, because you have American citizens whose lives have been uprooted, whose livelihoods are being destroyed. And if you know anything about how
Like who?
the FBI handles its counterterrorism,
Which American citizens' lives have been uprooted?
Richard, they don't open a case
Which
investigating
citizens?
a person. They open up a case
which
investigating a
citizens' lives
subject matter.
have been uprooted.
We're talking about the FBI here. They open up investigation on a subject matter, i.e. Trump campaign collusion with Russia, and they find people to put under that umbrella, and then they find people to expand that out,
Richard,
like people who
finish.
aren't even
I'll
a
let you
part of the
talk.
campaign.
Okay, go
well,
ahead,
let's
Richard.
talk about another fact. From that same memo, on the last page, the last line, the memo indicates that the counterintelligence investigation was triggered by George Papadopoulos in talking to a foreign agent in London. So that's what triggered the investigation. And the subject matter was the Trump campaign and Trump associates talking to or sharing or working with the Russians to get information on the Hillary Clinton campaign. That's from the Republican memo. On the final
Which is
page,
exactly
on the last line.
my point. And you know who started that investigation? Peter Strzok. Used a drunk
And a
guy in
lot
a
of
bar
other
talking
agents.
to somebody about Hillary Clinton in opposition, which anyone with an internet connection could have seen that stuff.
Investigation with George Papadopoulos and Trump associates.
Guys, let's talk about when Jim Comey talks about, that's it, dishonest, misleading memo, wrecked the House Intel Committee, destroyed the trust with the intelligence community, damaged the relationship with the FISA court. To me, it's rather interesting, Richard, that in truth, I think Jim Comey has done more to destroy the confidence of the American people in the FBI. He is the one who created this mess. He is the one who used an unverified, salacious dossier that he told the president to re-up it a few more times. I mean, this is just, it's unheard of.
Listen, I don't like Jim Comey like the next guy because I think his FBI reign during his time as the final years of the FBI was very problematic. But I think that takes away from the larger fact that this particular memo that we're talking about here did a couple things. The first thing it did is it basically let the world know that the FBI was monitoring somebody who's been on their radar since July of 2013, Carter Page, for engaging with foreign agents to take down and destroy our democracy. And that is problematic, and that should not be out because this investigation is not over.
Go ahead, Katrina.
Yet this guy is still walking
because
around.
He's still under investigation.
No,
It's
but
like
there's
the
been other
Mueller
indictments, but
investigation.
nothing for this. It's the Mueller investigation, yes, Judge. But here's the thing: we're sitting here and we're talking about these outrageous things that have been happening to American citizens.
Which American citizens?
But we need to figure out where this came from. Why were other people unmasked? Where is Susan Rice? What is Loretta Lynch's
I just have one
role?
question, Katrina.
This is
Which
why we need
American
a new
citizens' lives
special
have been
counsel.
uprooted
what?
you're talking about?
You know what?
Everybody that has to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to retain
Give me some
attorneys
names.
right now.
Some Paul
Several
Manafort committed a
Guys, I
crime.
want to
Mike
thank
Flynn,
you both for
Mike
being with me
Flynn
tonight.
pleaded
Katrina
Mike Flynn
Pearson,
pleaded
Richard
guilty.
Fowler, thanks so much. And still ahead, I'll take get the 30-plus year FBI veteran, all this. But next, Mike Huckabee standing by to talk about the memo, the reaction, and what happens. Justice rolls on in a minute. The debate continues tonight over whether this controversial memo should have even been released. My next guest believes the American people had to be allowed to see it. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee joins me now with more. All right, good evening, Governor. You believe that it had to be released?
Absolutely it did. And frankly, I think everything regarding this should be released. We should see the full FISA warrant that was given to the judge. We should see exactly what it says. I want the Democrat memo to be released. It's got to go through the same process that the Republican memo went through, but sure, we ought to see it. And I think every member of that committee
Let me just stop you there for a second, Governor. You know, there's a big thing, a big thing going on about how the Dems, they want their memo being released, and their memo isn't being released. Is there a process for that to happen that they need to go through, just like the Republicans?
Well, of course, what they have to do is to submit it to the White House, and then they have a 5-day window. They also have to have the FBI and the DOJ look at it to redact anything that they think could be a national security concern. But here's something I want to know. Where are the civil libertarians? They've been so very critical of FISA from all the way back to its inception under George W. Bush and their use of it rather so much. And where is the ACLU? Not because they like Donald Trump. They don't have to like him. They can think that he's guilty of whatever they want to think he's guilty of. But from a strict Fourth Amendment standpoint and a civil liberty issue, there is not a due process that's been done here. There has been some very tainted ways in which the warrant was obtained. And that ought to alarm the heck. And I'm just wondering, where's the ACLU? They should be held accountable for this.
You know, there's also another, John McCain tweeted, the latest attacks on the FBI and the Department of Justice serve no American interests, no party, no president, only Putin's. What's going on with John McCain?
I can't figure that out. That has got to be the most disconnected kind of comment related to this whole issue that I've seen. Because this isn't about the Russians. This is about whether or not our own government, not the entire FBI, not the entire DOJ. This is whether officials at the top dove to the bottom of ethical behavior. And if they did, they should be held accountable. Look, I want to make a point, Judge, that I don't hear enough. I've heard people say, well, so what if they get all this information on us as citizens? After all, Google has a lot of information on me. But, Judge, Google can't arrest me, break my door down at 3 in the morning. They can't put me in handcuffs, put me in court, and send me to prison for the rest of my life. The government can, and that's why our founders wisely created the Fourth Amendment that protected us from our own government abusing our basic liberties.
But what we're seeing, Governor, is people at the highest echelons going into the most secret court, using lies, and then repeatedly going back for more extensions on the surveillance. It doesn't seem to be working.
Well, it not only doesn't seem to be working, but it really does seem to constitute a violation to the point that if anything should come out, does that, and you're the judge, you can perhaps answer this better than me, but does that not constitute a reason to throw the whole case out because the manner in which the evidence was collected was not proper? I mean, that's the kind of thing that can get a prosecutor in trouble for not following the proper procedure in obtaining the evidence.
Well, there's no question. And what you refer to is, Hornbook law. It's fruit of the poisonous tree. I mean, when you, end up putting something in that is lies and then something blossoms from it, well, that's fruit of the poisonous trees. It's got to be dead. It's dismissed. It's not allowed into evidence. And yet nobody seems to be concerned about that except us. And I think that what we need to do is have some kind of reckoning that the Department of Justice, not so much the FBI. I think that the American people believe that when certain people are gone, that, the FBI rank and file is phenomenal. But the DOJ, it's still in the mud.
Well, it is. And you have these very incompatible statements being said by high officials. Jim Comey, for example, talked about how that this would just be the worst breach of security. It would destroy the whole idea of national security. It would be disastrous if the Republicans released the information. And then when it comes out, he says, oh, this is it? There's nothing here? Well, it can't be both. Judge, it's one or the other. It's either a terrible violation of national security or it's nothing. Yeah. But it can't be both things at the same time.
Governor Mike Huckabee, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, and 30-plus years with the Bureau. I'm talking live with a retired FBI agent about everything that's going on. Don't miss it. And now for a different perspective on the memo and what's next, someone who spent 30-plus years with the FBI, former FBI Supervisory Special Agent James Weddick, depicted in the book Chasing Phil. He joins me now to weigh in. All right, good evening, James. How do you combat corruption in the world's largest law enforcement organization?
Jeanine, the FBI is very good at conducting corruption investigations. It's the one thing, in fact, it's the leading criminal violation they do well. And in this particular instance, we wouldn't be relying on FBI executives or DOJ officials to conduct it, but the career officials, investigators, special agents that you talk about many times on your program that would just like to look at the facts of this case and render a verdict for the American public.
Well, you were involved in the case where, when you were in the FBI, you ended up circling the globe and getting yourself involved in the case that actually started Abscam, which ended up putting some officials in prison, many of them. What do you think is going to be the upshot here? I mean, do you see corruption here, or is this just some bad dealing?
Well, thanks for mentioning Chasing Phil by David Howard. I see that we're at a place in time that has not occurred before, and I do believe the American public is going to deserve that we conduct a fair, impartial, but thorough investigation. And I think, as we did in California, I ran the corruption squad here in Sacramento. It's the nation's most populous state, the largest state, and we were able to overcome any and all problems with respect to corrupt officials. So I don't doubt that the bench is there for our agency to conduct it and to get to the bottom line, the bottom story.
But who's doing the investigation of the investigators?
Well, that's the question here. We've got to look at, McCabe, Comey, Yates. There's some serious questionable activities that they engaged themselves in. And I think the career body, agents that have been on the agency for a long time looking at white-collar corruption, I don't doubt that they're up to the job to take a look and return and conduct an investigation.
What kind of crimes are you seeing here?
I'm seeing false declarations, obstruction, probably on the court, conspiracy to defraud the United States in violation of Title 18, Sections 371, false declarations, Section 1623. And let me also add this. submitting a false application or an affidavit to a FISA court and accusing Carter Page of being a Russian agent, they may very well have also violated the civil rights provision of the color of law provision of the Civil Rights Act, which is Title 18, Section 242. So there are a lot of possibilities here for agents to look at.
Interesting. Governor Huckabee just talked about, why the ACLU isn't involved in this. But do you have hope that some people will be made accountable, or is this just politics as usual?
Well, no, sure. I do think that the Inspector General is doing a good job. They've uncovered a lot of stuff. Remember this, the Bureau got on, it wasn't 2 minutes after Strzok's text disappeared, they said that they disappeared forever. It was the IG that found them immediately. And the agency has a, cyber capability, but they tried to lay that excuse down that they weren't around or they couldn't be found.
So sad. So sad. All right, James Whittock, so nice to have you on Justice tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks
we'll be
a lot,
right
Jeanine.
back. Finally tonight, I just want to say a great big thank you to who? To whom? To you for making Justice #1 again last week. So don't forget to friend me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Judge_Jeanine. And you never have to miss Justice. If you can't watch, set your DVR. Thanks so much for watching. See you next Saturday night. I'm Jeanine Pirro, advocating for truth, justice, and the American way. The Greg Gutfeld Show is next.
I feel bad for you, intelligent people like you and Rachel and Brian Williams and Nicole Wallace and Lawrence O'Donnell and Gene Robinson. You all have to sit there and talk about this guy as if he's a president.
He'll always be meathead. All right, so you have a choice. Do we talk about the State of the Union? Or do we talk about the memo? Or do we look at a video of adorable puppies going down a slide? I joke, because you're going to get all three. First, the speech. It had so many high notes, you'd need Mariah Carey to sing it. I don't know how he did that. Of course, others saw it differently, and by others, I mean crybaby chuckle buckets.
The raw meat was ugly, and then the appeals to fear-mongering.
He implied, and he did it deliberately, that Dreamers are gang members.
His racist and hate-filled words and policies and proposals are still being resisted in the Congress.
There was a lot of dark talk. There was a lot of manifestations of threat.
Somebody airlift a pallet of Depends. There's a lot of poop on those floors. Anyway, sour grapes is to be expected. Why would you praise your opponent after he wiped the mat with you? And that's the problem with team sport politics. Even when there's good news for the country, it's bad news for the party. And there's a lot of good news on jobs, ISIS, the economy, all good, but we could do better. But the Democrats remain sour. Schumer looks like he's the Penguin from Batman. He's trying to pass a softball-sized gallstone. And Pelosi looks like that gallstone is about to hit her in the Mercedes. And the rest of the Democrats, they all look like they shared the same hemorrhoid. So what's the problem? Well, first, that speech wasn't for them. It was for you. I thought it was too long, but for you, it's not long enough. 90 minutes of positivity about this great country after 8 years of moaning about America. This speech was a water cooler in the desert. So for Dems, your good news is their bad news, but also their bad news is your good news. So in the future, Here's a handy measurement for success. I call it the Pelosi Scowlometer. Look at that. The more she frowns, the more you should smile. All right. Which leads me to the memo. The week was fraught with anticipation, as if the royal family was giving birth to a panda. The nation wanted answers. Their thirst wouldn't be quenched until they heard this command.
Release the memo.
Well, good work there, dubbing. Yes, the memo. Finally, it was released, and it became the Super Bowl for nerds. Now, if it's all true, the dossier was put together by Christopher Steele with funding from the DNC and Fusion GPS. Then they played it up to media outlets. Then the Justice Department asked for surveillance warrants, but according to the memo, the application didn't disclose the role of the DNC or Clinton campaign in funding the dossier. The memo also claims that former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe wouldn't have sought the warrant without this dossier. Now, maybe it's me, but it's got Clinton stink all over it. All roads lead back to the perv and the pantsuit. Sounds like a good TV series. I wonder if Trump thinks it's disgraceful.
I think it's terrible. You want to know the truth? I think it's a disgrace. What's going on in this country, I think it's a disgrace. The memo was sent to Congress. It was declassified. Congress will do whatever they're going to do. But I think it's a disgrace.
I think it's a disgrace. But, he's right. The Dems wanted to nail Trump so badly, they were willing to use an unvetted, hyper-partisan dossier to do it. Using this dossier to get a warrant, that's like me using Monopoly money to buy a Porsche. Look, we spent the last year hearing about collusion between Trump and Russia, and all along, the real collusion was committed by the perpetrators of that narrative, meaning the media, Democrats, and their government allies. This whole mess is brought to you by the same people, and that's not cool. Right? Adorable puppies going down a slide?
Good puppies! Good job! Can you do it? Yay! Come on, puppy! Yay! Puppy, puppy!
I told you there would be puppies.
Period.
Yes! Let us welcome tonight's guest. He had no qualms defusing bombs tougher than senior year calculus. It's former U.S. Marines bomb technician, Staff Sergeant Joey Joe. And another hero. His jokes are drier than powdered milk. Writer and comedian David Angelo. And the real hero. If you can't handle her smirk, then you're probably a jerk. National Review reporter Kat Timpf. Finally, the Jolly Green Giant sends him hate mail. Former bodyguard, massive sidekick Tyrus. All right, Joey. You got the State of the Union, you got the memo. Take your pick and run.
Two State of the Union addresses, 2011 and 2013. And so 2011, the Tea Party came to be, and we had all these freshman Republican congressmen. And you could see them, it'd be so funny, because Obama was really good at saying things like, you shouldn't pay more taxes than you should, so let's pay our fair share.
Right.
And so you see Republican congressmen going, but they were eager to clap. They wanted to. They just needed Boehner to tell them when to do it.
Yes.
And so I guess the Democrats went into this one with a game plan much easier. From the set, let's set this one out. Let's just sit there, left hand, left knee, right hand, right knee, and leave it alone. So to see them sit there through some of the things that he pointed out, Trump wrote a speech that dared them not to celebrate this country, and they didn't do it.
Yeah, he set up the trap. He said, if you're not going to stand for this, he talks about the flag. He set up these little, minefields, and they just, well, that's a terrible metaphor for you.
I love it. Hey, look, I'm batting like 900 with mines, okay? I had one bad day.
You had one bad day, Joey. One bad day.
Had a leg or two up on me.
Can't have one bad day. Terrible. All right, David, what about the memo?
Well, the memo was good, but we all kind of wanted more out of the memo, I feel like. It didn't give enough secrets.
Yeah.
I feel like they should just open it up. If you have TSA pre-check, they should let you in the vault for like an hour. Anything you get, like supermarket sweeps, you know, like any document.
That's a good idea.
But here's the thing that was in that the memo, I already knew. Let's show the tweet.
Yeah.
Can we have the tweet?
Yeah. Here.
This is from March 2017.
This is you.
Yeah. I can't read it. It's too far away.
I'll read it for you. Possibility. Dems invented the Russian thing, fake server, etc., as a pretext for FISA, and the news has just been carrying water for them. Ooh.
The most trusted name in news.
Yes, yes, yes. You were like a psychic with really interesting glasses. All right. Speaking of interesting glasses, Kat, what would you like to talk about? Would you like to talk about the amazing speech that Trump gave, or the groundbreaking, earth-shattering memo?
Oh, my God. Okay. I'll talk about the memo. I'm really, really glad the memo was released. I want to see all the things the FBI does not want me to see.
Right.
100%. But I think we need to take a look at how this was able to happen in the first place and look at reforming this entire area of government where we take the Fourth Amendment more seriously so it's not so easy to surveil American citizens.
You know, I will agree with you here. Because that's the thing that bothers me. Anybody could, like, create a questionable dossier about my life.
Yeah.
And it might not be questionable. Might not be questionable. Those 2 years. Well, anyway, Tyrus, thoughts on the memo?
Thoughts on your dossier, yeah. Why there's no unicorns, kids.
It was a donkey dressed as a unicorn.
See? So, you know what? Here was my frustration this week. I thought the State of the Union was very good. I thought it's always good to hear positive things about our country because we don't hear enough about them.
Yes.
But I was looking for one thing, and I thought maybe it was going to be infrastructure that was going to bring the sides together or start some kind of dialogue. Because after the State of the Union was over, those of us who love Trump still love Trump, and those of us who hate him and blame him for everything in the entire world that's going wrong, they still hated him. And to tie it in with the memo, it's kind of the same thing.
Right.
If you don't like the Russian investigation, if you have issues with the left, you're going to support the memo.
Right.
And if you're, if you love Trump, you're going to be that's what we needed. But my issue with that is just Page. That's the guy. Like, he's dang, every group has one, and we have him. And that dude just can't. And then when he tweets, I'm just like, this didn't mean. The only one I don't want to hear from more than Page is Cruz. Like, those are the two guys I just don't want to hear from. And I just keep waiting for something that's going to start bringing us together. And I just feel like the divisions lines get drawn in the sand, and there's no middle ground. Like if you're going to, my book, I kept thinking about, I'm working on a book. It's like living in the Great Divide. Is it about mountains? No.